You know, there has been a lot said about big tech censorship of what transpired around the origins of the COVID-19 virus and where this came from, how it moved to a pandemic. And then there's also questions about what the American people were told and the timeliness or lack thereof of what they were being told. We know that Facebook recently reversed their decision on taking down any kind of information that said it came from the lab in Wuhan, that Beijing should be held to account. YouTube had previously announced that it would censor any content that contradicted the Beijing-run and China-funded World Health Organization.
The result of this quarter century has been that it has allowed a handful of internet big tech platforms to grow enormously large, enormously rich, and enormously powerful to the point where they decide what is the news. They decide what information the public is going to get and what information is going to be blocked. And it's not just the Wuhan virus, which is an outrage, as my colleagues have just described. We could cite chapter and verse time and time again about these big platforms deciding what we will hear and what we can't hear. So let me just help out by saying Senator Johnson is right, and I will cite a few examples. Google threatened to cut off several conservative websites, including The Federalist. How do they have the power to do that? How can they justify doing that? Companies restrict or terminate conservative users' accounts and content on social media. Facebook announced it's suspending the account of a former president of the United States. That is too much power for them to decide who can and who cannot make news and be quoted. Twitter moved to censor any coronavirus coverage that they thought, in their judgment, might cause widespread panic. How does a multi-rich, powerful internet platform get to make that decision? And I could go on and on and on. That's why I've joined with senators like Senator Blackburn in trying to correct the Section 230 gaps, but also why I'm introducing legislation to make it clear that these large internet tech platforms cannot discriminate.
You know, I was shocked as I went back and reviewed some of the letters that were written, but really what rose my suspicion was somewhere back in January of 2020. And the Chinese were saying that there was no person-to-person transmission. The WTO agreed, and the CDC didn't stand up to them. And that led for me to have a phone call with the CDC. And all the national journalists were reporting that the United States scientists were investigating this new novel virus. And when I talked to the CDC, they said, well, we've got scientists in Beijing, but they're thousands of miles from Wuhan, so we really don't have anything to tell you. And then the next thing I see is this letter signed by a group of scientists who have ignored even the possibility that this virus could have risen from the laboratory. They totally ignored it. They threw out the scientific hypothesis that this was even feasible. And then come to find out, most of those scientists, if not all of them, were receiving some type of funding then and in the future from the NIH, and our CDC sat there and nodded their head in agreement. And then national journalists, big tech companies, they worked together to suppress this story. They worked together to censor those of us who thought that this virus may have originated there. And not only did they suppress, they actually shamed people who thought that this might have came from a laboratory. And then finally, we see in Dr. Fauci's emails a collusion, working with Dr. Fauci, big tech working together to suppress this story. You know, here we are, we're 17 months later. We still don't know anything much more about this virus. You know, I think that we have to hold the CCP accountable. And if the United States is in any way accountable, if they helped fund laboratories that led to the development of this virus, then we need to be held accountable as well. And we need a deep dive into what viral gain of research rules look like going forward as well. You know, we're never going to get to the bottom of this unless we stop this cover-up of the Wuhan lab leak, until we stop Batgate. Thanks, Marcia.